next presentation, we're really excited to bring in an NBCT, who is our friend who works in New York City but lives in Oceanside. And we're super fond of her. She's a teacher, she's an author, she's a social media maven. You may have heard her on Twitter or at Ed Week or all these awesome things. It's our friend Sackstein. Give her a round of applause, please.
Okay, so I had a plan. I have since thrown out that plan. And as teachers, you all know what that's like. You get into a room, you have a plan, the plan doesn't go the way you want, so you have to be really fast on your feet and decide what you're going to do instead, because you want to kind of readdress what's going on in front of you. So my personal story, and I could identify with Keisha, and also what Jen and Erin were saying so much. Except my analogy that people usually throw at me is the first one through the wall is usually the bloodiest. And in my school community, I am bloody all the time because I don't agree with a lot of things that education is doing right now, and I'm not afraid to say it loudly most of the time. It wasn't always like that. I mean, I've been teaching for 14 years. In the beginning part of my career, I was in Far Rockaway High School with students who had no voice, and that pissed me off. And even though I had no tenure and nothing that went with that, I still said things that made people angry and didn't really care whether or not they threw me out because of it. Because if I was going to be a teacher, that was the kind of teacher I wanted to be. I wanted to be the kind of teacher that was going to really stand up for my kids, whomever my kids were at that time, and also started with this book. And I started blogging, which was my first major sort of step. Now, when I started blogging, and some people say to me, I have nothing to say, no one knows what, no one's going to read what I write, when am I going to find the time? A million different things. And I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret that I have. When I started blogging, my boyfriend posted the posts for me. I didn't even want anything to do with the technology. I'm like, I have this idea for a post. I email it to him, put it up. And he would at first, and then he didn't do it fast enough. And I'm type A personality. So if you don't do it fast enough, I'm going to do it myself. And he knew that about me. So he purposely didn't do it fast enough so that I would have to figure it out. And the first time I went into my WordPress on the back end, I screwed it. I broke it. I broke the WordPress. And it went down, and I was freaking out. And I ran into his room with my laptop, and I'm like, I broke it. I broke the WordPress. My WordPress isn't working. And he was like, you didn't do anything. Don't worry about it. You could go back and it's all going to be there. And I was like, okay. So I hit the back button, and it was all there. I still had no idea what I was doing. But I was going to learn. And the best gift that he gave me was the gift of figuring it out on my own, which I think we have to do with our kids all the time. We want to tell them what to do. We want to show them how to do it, and then we want to do it for them. But that's not so good. That's not so good for their learning. I mean, it makes us feel awesome when we can fix it for them, but it doesn't necessarily help them learn it, right? So they need to struggle, like I struggled with the WordPress when I first started, right? And what ended up happening, those of you who read any of my blogs now, something crazy happened. Like, I started really understanding how to work all of it. I started reading other things that definitely made it easier also. And from that blog post here and there, I started to go on Twitter because I wanted to share what I was writing because nobody was really reading it. He also gave me the gift and curse of Google Analytics. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but once you have a blog, you can actually follow how many people are reading. So you want to know that people are reading, and I remember the first time I went in, I was like, 3 people read today! 3, right? Now, any of you who know what I do now, writing for Ed Week, and I have 40,000 people who read every single month. But it started with 3. And 3 was a lot back then. And then there was 12. That was the second time. And then I started getting obsessive like I do with everything. And every day I had to look to see how many people were reading. And then I stopped looking because I was getting obsessive. So it started like that. And getting onto Twitter, I started lurking at first. And over the summer, there was a couple of chats. And then all of a sudden, somebody asked a question, and I don't remember what it was specifically, but I felt compelled to respond. And it didn't matter at that point whether or not anyone else thought what I had to say was important. I thought it was important. So I did it. And I got it out there, and people liked it. And I was like, oh, okay. There are people out there that understand me. I mean, we'll talk about my school in a second, because that's a whole other thing. My whole talk is about being outside the classroom. And I do that sometimes much better than I do inside the school building. Not with the kids, necessarily. I'm talking about the leadership piece. I don't do leadership in my school, unfortunately, because I'm not allowed to. Again, story for another time. What I do, though, at this point, Twitter started really connecting me, and what ended up happening, the most amazing thing happened. So SatChat, it's a Saturday morning leadership chat. It starts at 7:30 in the morning for all of us here. Asked me to moderate a chat about my book, Teaching Mythology Exposed. And this was all around the same time that I had gotten nationally board certified. And when I did that, I didn't have the benefit, like a lot of you in this room did, of having a cohort. I did it by myself. Because in New York City, again, I was not aware at all of the fact that there were people doing it. But I was involved in JEA at the time, Journalism Education Association, and I put out to my listserv, hey, I'm doing my national board, has anyone done it? I would really love somebody to just read what I wrote and make sure it's like following the directions. Because there was a lot of writing, and I wanted to just make sure that I didn't go off the rails, you know? And somebody reached out, and she was super nice, and she read what I wrote and gave me feedback, and I was able to get through the process. And fortunately, I did do it on the first time around, because again, type A personality, I don't really like to fail very much. Not to say that I haven't failed, I'm just saying that this was a journey that I was taking, and I was going to make it work. So I made it work. And I did it because nobody was giving me feedback anymore in my classroom. My administration stopped because I got it. You know, she knows what she's doing, we don't need to give her feedback anymore. And I felt very stagnant and bored. So I took this next step along with the social media and everything that was sort of happening on the outside all at the same time. And the reflection became a huge piece of it, which then the blogging became an outgrowth of that as more time went on. So back to the social media stuff for a second. I know I'm all over the place. I apologize for that. At this point, I did the SatChat, right? And Peter DeWitt, you guys know who Peter DeWitt is? Also Ed Week, Finding Common Ground. He really liked what I had to say, and he asked me to do a guest post for his blog, Finding Common Ground. And again, type A, I'm like, when do you need it by? He's like, 2 weeks. I got it to him in 2 hours. And he couldn't believe it, that I got it to him so quickly, and that it was done really well. And I'm like, if you ever want me to do it again, I'd be happy to do it. And he's like, sure. So I'm like, when do you need it? He's like, we'll get it done. We don't want to do too much too fast. And after like my third post for him, he went to his editor and said, she needs a blog of her own. Because you have a voice, and people need to hear what you have to say. And I was shocked, because in my educational experience in New York City, unfortunately, no one really ever advocated for me. Ever. I was my only advocate. And now here's this other guy who's never met me in person, who's totally willing to go to bat so that I can get my voice heard, which was pretty amazing. Now, it didn't stop there. Peter did help me get my blog. I mean, I sent them in a couple of sample posts, and then Ed Week Teacher gave me work in progress, which is what I've been doing for the last 2 years with them. And he moved away from being a principal and started working with Corwin. And Corwin started their Connected Educator series. And he said, Star, I'm going to call on you for another favor now. We want you to write a book. Now, this isn't the traditional route. I know most people have to submit proposals and whatnot, but it was kind of weird that somebody was coming to me and just saying, what do you want to write about? We want you on board. And this was a childhood dream. I always wanted to write a book. And yes, I had already done the Teaching Myth book, but that was like mine, and I self-published it, and for some reason it didn't feel as important as someone else acknowledging me and asking me to write a book for them. So I did blogging for educators, and it was a pretty good experience. And it worked out really, really nicely. And then once I started Ed Week, another publisher contacted me and was like, we read this post that you wrote about questions, and we want you to write a book about it. I'm like, well, that was like a 750-word post. What do you mean you want me to write a book about it? I don't know that I have 30,000 words about questions, honestly. So what I decided to do with that book when that situation came is I went to my friends who were also experts, And I said, I'd love for you to do an excerpt from my book about questions, how do you use questions, how do you empower kids in your classroom, and I'd love for you to participate in what's going on in my book. And I got a lot of really amazing people who reached out. So ultimately, my blogging, my fearful blogging, got me to tweeting, which then got my voice heard, which then offered me opportunities to write books, and now I have written 6 books. 6, and I'm working on a 7th with ASCD right now. And I'm also sort of in a place in my career where Keisha was saying before about that teacher leader spot. Like, I don't know that staying in a classroom is for me. I don't know that I want to be an administrator. But I also know that I want to do something bigger. And last weekend, I had the opportunity to be at ESA 2 in San Diego with the Gates Foundation, Teacher to Teacher. And when you're around those folks, you feel really freaking good about yourselves because they really go out of their way to appreciate teachers. And the whole mission that National Board was talking about before, that's what they do. They elevate and celebrate what we do as a profession. And they make sure every single teacher in the room feels like they matter. And when you come back from an experience like that, back into your 4 walls, inside of your classroom, inside of your school where nobody knows what the hell you're doing outside, you start to feel not so good about what you're doing. Which is why, again, if we want things to happen in our careers, we can't wait for someone to offer those opportunities to us. We have to find the opportunities ourselves, and that's what Twitter and social media has kind of done for me. I wouldn't have anything that I have now in my career outside of my school building had I not taken the initiative to seek it out. Whether it was my National Board certification or it was making a blog that nobody read and now everybody reads, it seems. And that could be you also, because every single person in this room has a super amazing, unique story to tell that's yours. And no one else can tell that story. And in education, we really do need to have more people sharing their story, their kids' stories, every story that makes teaching amazing and drown, kind of like flood the media with positive teaching stories instead of the really gross ones that are all over the place, that get top billing with everything. And we have that opportunity all the time. So if you're ready to start kind of taking that leap, I suggest you get on Twitter if you're not on it already. If you don't know how, you could come to my session next, and I will get you on there. I would suggest you start a blog. There's lots of free ones that are a lot less complicated than WordPress, like Blogger if you're already using Google. You can do that as well. You don't have to write every day like the crazy freak that I am. You know, that's just, reflection has sort of become a part of my practice. And to keep myself really honest and transparent, I write every day. It's a part of my routine. You have to make it a part of your routine or else it's not going to happen. I sit down on my first prep after a period of teaching, and whatever went right or whatever went wrong, that's exactly what I write about. And I put it all out there, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's out there. If you go on my blog, you'll see. Last year, favorite one, my observation. I took pictures of it and posted it on my blog, and then took my administrators to task for not giving me actual feedback. Because if you're going to mark me down on something, I want to know why. If I did that to a kid, I probably would have gotten in trouble. So why is it okay for them to do it to me? Just because I'm highly effective doesn't mean I don't deserve feedback. And that's what we have to do. We have to be bold. You know, I mean, I don't know, I recently, my last book, and I'll end with this little story, is called Hacking Assessment. And right here this morning, I was kind of in a little Twitter back and forth with somebody who basically said what I'm doing is impossible because kids need grades. Kids do not need grades. Teachers need grades. Okay? And bear that in mind yourselves when you're sitting down to grade kids. We can't quantify what our kids do with numbers or letters. And the whole thing that I write about in my book is how to turn assessment into a formative practice where it's a conversation with your student, not an opportunity for you to judge your student in any way, shape, or form. And that's what the whole book is about. So I go back and forth all the time. People do think I'm crazy. No, I do not grade my students. When it comes time to put a letter grade on my report card, we have a conversation. It's a mastery conversation. They tell me what they think they're doing well, and then we determine what the best course of action would be for their report card, and then there's no surprises, because they told me what they wanted and I gave it to them. So it's a very different experience when you get, I wouldn't have had the balls, so to speak, to walk out 10 years ago in the earlier part of my career and necessarily say the things that I say now, but now I wouldn't have it any other way. Because more people need to be speaking out about the bad things that happen and how we can fix them. I'm definitely solution-oriented. So instead of just complaining about the things that happen in our space, and social media can do that as well, but don't be one of those voices. Be one of the voices that shares solutions. And I just challenge all of you, if you aren't out there yet, you need to be, because you are selling yourself short, and you're taking that opportunity away from us to really grow from your story as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope everybody has a super rest of your day.
Hi everybody, thanks Star. So here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to play a song.